wonder-working power, precious blood of the Lamb. I'm delighted to introduce that because I think that sets the feel for Theaster Gates. It really undergirds a lot of the work that he does even now. We met when I lived in Chicago back in the 1990s. He was working with the city of Chicago doing urban planning, working with the Metro, and we met during the spoken word scene that was happening in Chicago. I was in awe of him, not only because of the way that he could blend spirituality and spoken word together, but because even in the midst of all of that, he had his potter's wheel right there in his apartment. Community building has been part and parcel of his life from the very beginning. Where we began to work together, however, was in 2010. I was working at the Contemporary Arts Museum in Houston, very, again, interested in the kind of concentric circles of practices. He was working with clay making, vessel making, and the history of vessel making, and when and where Black bodies entered into the space to sort of claim space. He had mounted this amazing exhibition in the Milwaukee Art Museum called To Speculate Darkly. By that time, he was already moving into the space of the Rebuild Foundation. He had been gifted all of these glass slides from the University of Chicago, also Illinois University. And the slides themselves created a bit of a pathway into finding, discovering the revelatory information about David Drake. But at that same time, working from the space of contemporary art, I was also looking at how artists came from different modes of traditional making to transgress, if you will, to push and find the spaces of elasticity in the field. I had mounted an exhibition called Hand Plus Made, the performative impulse in art and craft. Theaster, building upon To Speculate Darkly, created a beautiful presentation. He had been in residence at the Kohler Art Center and created wonderful sinks, if you will, that he had converted into speakers. And the speakers, of course, played excerpts of the song and the libretto and the opera that he had created in relation to David Drake. But he also came to Houston with the Monks of Mississippi, and he set upon a small men's chorus the idea of excerpts of this libretto. What's remarkable about Theaster is that he manages to build community wherever he goes. That is driven by his own practice, which is a solitary practice in the studio, but it radiates outward. He's managed to meld all of these things together. He's managed to bring church with him wherever he goes, which is one of the pillars of his own evolution as a person and as an artist. He has been really focused on Rebuild and the community building that has taken place on the south side of Chicago. These amazing works such as the Sly Pavilion, where he then trains other young artists in the community to work with him to create works in the renovation of these spaces. One of the things that I think he and I have both been interested in are spaces in which we belong as Black bodies in the field. For me, that manifestation was in an exhibition called The Dirty South, Contemporary Art, Material Culture, and the Sonic Impulse, looking at sound and looking at various materials and how artists over the course of years have used sound, have used materials as an exchange in each and every successive generation to really come to an understanding of their place in their space and what is preserved, what as we as vessels, as human bodies, maintain as a repository of knowledge and traditional knowledge. This is a piece by Kevin Sipp called Take It to the Bridge. And what I love about it is that, of course, it features a ceramic vessel. The Dirty South itself was looking at three concepts. It was looking at the land itself from the South. It was looking at the Black body, and it was also looking at spaces around spirituality, as all encapsulated in this one image by Ramel Ross called Caspera. Here it is the notion of seeing without sight, meaning that there's another space that is activated in which one sees without sight. And coming out of the South, of course, you think about other traditional modes of making, particularly with clay, the face jars and face jugs and face cups, and the undergirding of spirituality in his practice, which now moves beyond the sort of foundational ideas around the Pentecostal church or the Baptist church and melding ideas around Eastern philosophies. He's created a construct called the Afro-Mingwe, which is blending West African ideals with that of the pillars of making that comes out of Japan. And of course you see that in West African sculpture, particularly around the Dan mask, and particularly around in southern Africa, Zaire and South Africa, these particular vessels, which the forms themselves begin to manifest in Theaster's work. And it's quite connected in the sense that he actually studied in South Africa as well as Japan. And when we think about modernism, it starts to creep in the ideas of modernism. And I'm always quick to point out that modernism didn't just come from the West, even though the West was looking toward the East. Both Asia and Africa in the formulation of their aesthetics that would then become the translation of modernism in the Western world. This piece is called Open Arms. You're seeing also him bringing in notions of the East and Japan, these forms, simple architectural forms, the notion of elevating, thinking of the maker and thinking of the human body and what holds us. And then, of course, the vessel with tar, the cauldron, which really speaks to his father, who was a roofer. Theaster often accompanied his father on roofing jobs, and so he's quite proficient in the use of tar, and he coats a lot of the vessels with tar. And then again, bringing the sermon wherever he goes, notions of minimalism, but also spiritualism that manifests in Theaster's exhibitions. This is an organ with several of the speakers mounted, and a contingent of the Black monks of Mississippi. In 2019, Theaster was offered the Serpentine Pavilion in London, and I'll leave you with that presentation.